The silence in the St. Jude's Cathedral was heavy, suffocating, and smelled faintly of expensive jasmine and cold, calculating betrayal. I stood there, framed by $200,000 worth of white orchids, feeling the itchy lace of my Vera Wang gown pressing against my skin like 1,000 tiny needles. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. That's what the magazines say. That's what my mother-in-law, Mrs. Chen, had been screaming at me for 14 months. I looked at Ken, my soulmate. He looked like a prince. His tuxedo was custom-tailored, his hair was perfectly coiffed, and he had that soft, misty-eyed expression that he'd been practicing in the mirror. To the 300 guests sitting in the pews, the elite of the city's architectural and social circles, he was the perfect groom. To my left, standing just inches away, was Chloe, my maid of honor. My best friend since the first day of freshman year at Cornell. She was adjusting my train, her fingers lingering a second too long on the fabric. She leaned in, her breath smelling of the pre-ceremony champagne I'd paid for. "You look breathtaking, May," she whispered. Her voice was like honey poured over shards of glass. "Ken is a lucky man. I'm so happy for you both, truly." I caught the scent of her perfume, velvet orchid. It was a heavy floral scent. The same scent that had been lingering in the upstropy of Ken's car for months. The same scent that I'd found on a silk tie tucked under our bed 3 weeks ago. The priest, a man who looked like he'd seen 1,000 unions and believed in every single one of them, cleared his throat. His voice boomed through the high-vaulted ceilings. "If anyone here has cause why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now, or forever hold their peace." It's a standard line, a relic of the past. Usually, it's followed by a polite, awkward silence while people wait for the "I do." But I didn't let the silence last. I stepped back, pulling my hand out of Ken's grasp. The sudden movement caused a ripple of murmurs to stir in the pews. "I have something to say," I said. My voice wasn't shaking. It was flat, cold. I reached into the hidden pocket I'd had the seamstress sew into the layers of my tulle skirt and pulled out a small, black remote. Ken's eyes widened. A flicker of something, not love, but pure unadulterated panic flashed across his face. "May, what are you doing?" "Honey, it's the nerves. Let's just— "The video, please," I said, looking directly at the tech booth at the back of the cathedral. The giant 20-foot LED screens, which were supposed to show a heartwarming montage of our journey of love, flickered to life, but it wasn't childhood photos of us at the park. It wasn't the video of our engagement in Santorini. It was a grainy, wide-angle shot of our future nursery. The room we'd just finished painting pale seafoam, and there, on the rocking chair I'd spent 3 weekends restoring, were Ken and Chloe. The cathedral went so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. But to understand how I got to this moment, how I decided to spend $250,000 just to burn 2 lives to the ground in front of everyone they ever cared about, you need to know the whole story. You need to know how Ken and Chloe thought they could play me for a fool. I met Ken at Miller and Associates. I was a junior architect. He was a senior project manager. He was charming, the kind of man who knew everyone's name, from the CEO to the night janitor. He noticed me when I was staying late to finish the blueprints for the Riverside project. "You're going to burn out before you're 30, May," he'd said, dropping a cup of high-end coffee on my desk. "Let me take you to dinner. No blueprints. No talk of load-bearing walls. Just us." It was a whirlwind. He was the golden boy of the local Chinese-American community. His family, the Chens, owned half the commercial real estate in the downtown district. To my parents, he was the ultimate catch. To me, he was the first man who seemed to appreciate how hard I worked. But looking back, the signs were there from the start. It wasn't love he was looking for. It was a partner who could maintain his image while he did whatever he pleased. Then there was Chloe. We were inseparable in college. I was the one who pulled the all-nighters in the studio. She was the one who brought the snacks and the gossip. She never quite found her footing after graduation. She jumped from marketing job to marketing job, always complaining that her creative spirit was being crushed by corporate drones. When Ken and I got engaged, I made her my maid of honor instantly. I felt bad for her. She was struggling with her rent, so I gave her a job as my wedding assistant. I paid her a salary, my own money, to help with the vendors, the flowers, the guest lists. I don't know what I'd do without you, Chloe, I told her one night over wine. I'll always be here for you, May. She replied, her eyes tracking Ken as he walked through the kitchen in his workout gear. Always, Mrs. Chen, my future mother-in-law, was the final piece of the puzzle. She was a woman who valued lineage and class above all else. She tolerated me because of my career, but she adored Chloe. Chloe knew how to flatter her. Chloe knew the right designers. Chloe came from old money, even if that money had long since dried up. May is so practical, Mrs. Chen would say during our dress fittings, her lip curling slightly. But Chloe, you have such a sense of flair. Why can't May be more like you? I laughed it off. I was too busy working 60 hours a week to fund the wedding of the century and the down payment on our 5-bedroom house in the hills. Ken was saving his money for our future, so I took the lead on the expenses. I thought we were a team. I thought he was working just as hard as I was. I didn't realize that while I was designing skyscrapers, he was designing a life that didn't include me, at least not in the way I imagined. The first real crack didn't happen with a scream. It happened with a laundry receipt. It was a Tuesday night, around 11 p.m. I had just finished a grueling conference call with a client in Tokyo. My eyes were burning, and my back felt like a coiled spring. Ken was at the gym, a habit he'd picked up about 6 months into the wedding planning. I was clearing out the pockets of his charcoal suit, the one he'd worn to the business gala. The night before, I found a slip of paper from a high-end dry cleaner in a part of town we never visit. The items? A silk cocktail dress and a men's dress shirt. I stared at it. I don't own a silk cocktail dress in emerald green, which was noted on the ticket when Ken came home, smelling of expensive soap and, disturbingly, not a drop of sweat. I showed him the receipt. Oh, that? He didn't even flinch. He just started unbuttoning his shirt, his back to me. Chloe spilled red wine on herself at the gala. She was spiraling, May. You know how she gets. I told her I'd drop it off at my guy's place so she wouldn't have to worry about the bill. I didn't want to bother you with it. At a gala I wasn't invited to, I asked, my voice small. He turned around then, his face shifting into that concerned look that I now realize was pure manipulation. May, honey, it was a networking event for project managers. You were buried in the Riverside blueprints. I told you about it, remember? You probably just forgot because you're so overworked. That was the start of the gaslighting phase. Over the next 3 months, it became a pattern. Items would go missing from our house. A bottle of vintage Bollinger I'd saved for our first anniversary. A pair of diamond studs my grandmother left me. You're losing your mind, May, Chloe would say, patting my hand as we looked over catering menus. You're so stressed with the wedding and the firm. You probably misplaced them. Why don't you go lie down? I'll handle the meeting with the florist. I started feeling like a guest in my own life. I was the one signing the checks. $15,000 for the floral walls, $8,000 for the ice sculptures, $30,000 for the catering deposit. But Chloe and Mrs. Chen were the ones making the decisions. I remember sitting in a tasting session, staring at a plate of Wagyu beef sliders. We're going with the lobster bisque, May, Mrs. Chen declared, not even looking at me. Ken prefers it, and Chloe thinks it matches the aesthetic of the ballroom better. But I'm allergic to shellfish, I said. It was a well-known fact. I'd ended up in the ER on our second date because of a stray shrimp. Mrs. Chen just waved her hand. You can have a salad, dear. Don't be difficult. This wedding isn't just about you. It's about the family image. I looked at Ken. He was scrolling on his phone, smiling at something. Ken, I prompted. Mom's right, babe. Just have the salad. It's better for your skin anyway. You've been looking a bit tired lately. I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. It wasn't just that they were ignoring me. It was the way they looked at each other when they thought I wasn't watching. A smirk, a lingering touch on the shoulder, a shared language of glances that I wasn't part of. I started staying up late, not to work, but to watch. I installed a nanny cam in the living room, telling myself it was for security because of the missing jewelry. For a week, I saw nothing but the cleaning lady and Ken eating cereal in his underwear. I felt like a crazy person. I was ready to take the camera down and apologize to the universe for being so paranoid. And then, Friday night happened. It was the weekend of my bridal shower. Chloe had organized it at a spa resort 3 hours away. I was supposed to stay overnight with 10 of my closest friends, but 3 hours into the pammering, I got a frantic call from my lead architect. The Riverside project, my baby, had a structural discrepancy in the foundation. I had to get back to the office immediately. I have to go, I told Chloe, throwing my robe off. No, May, you can't. Chloe actually grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly tight. Her eyes were wide, almost panicked. The facialist is coming. You're the bride. The firm will survive one night. It's the foundation, Chloe. If the concrete pours wrong, the whole building is toast. I'll be back by morning. I drove like a woman possessed. I spent 4 hours at the site, covered in dust and stress, until we realized it was a minor clerical error by a contractor. By 2 a.m., I was exhausted. I was closer to my house than the resort, so I decided to sleep in my own bed for 4 hours before heading back to the spa. I pulled into the driveway quietly. Ken's Tesla was there. The house was dark, except for a dim light in the upper hallway. I walked in, my heels clicking softly on the hardwood. I headed straight for the kitchen to grab a glass of water. As I passed the living room, I noticed something on the rug. A pair of high-heeled sandals, gold, strappy, Chloe's favorites. My heart didn't just beat, it hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I didn't make a sound. I took off my shoes and crept up the stairs. The door to our master bedroom was ajar. I didn't hear crying. I didn't hear an argument. I heard laughter. Do you think she'll actually notice the honeymoon fund is empty? That was Chloe's voice. It sounded different, sharper, meaner. She won't notice a thing, Ken's voice followed. It was a tone he never used with me. Casual, arrogant, intimate. May lives in her spreadsheets. As long as she has a building to design, she's happy. I've already moved the last 50 grand to the Cayman account I set up. By the time the divorce papers hit her desk next year, the marital assets will be a joke. And your mother? Chloe asked. She's okay with the plan? Hom loves you, Chloe. She's the one who suggested we wait until after the wedding. The wedding gifts alone will cover our new place in Italy. My sweet, hardworking May is basically our personal ATM. I almost feel bad for her, Chloe giggled, wearing that dress I picked out, standing there like a sheep. Don't feel bad, Ken said. I heard the bed creak. She's boring. You're the one I actually want. Now, come here. I stood in the hallway, the shadows swallowing me whole. I didn't burst in. I didn't scream. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. In that moment, something in me died. The girl who believed in happily ever after was gone. In her place was an architect, and architects know that when a structure is rotten to the core, you don't try to repair it. You perform a controlled demolition. I turned around, walked back down the stairs, and left the house. I drove back to the spa resort, checked into my room, and sat in the dark until the sun came up. When Chloe knocked on my door at 8 a.m. with a light, hangover cure smoothie, and a fake smile, I looked her in the eye and thanked her. You're such a good friend, Chloe, I said, and I meant it, because she had just given me the fuel I needed to destroy them both. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in acting. If there were an Oscar for unsuspecting bride-to-be, I would have swept every category. I didn't cry. I didn't confront them. Every time Ken kissed my cheek, I felt like I was being touched by a reptile, but I smiled. Every time Chloe helped me with my jewelry or discussed the seating chart, I nodded and thanked her, but behind the scenes, I was a ghost. The first thing I did was visit a boutique law firm, not the one my family used, but a Shark Tank office that specialized in high-stakes asset recovery. I met with a woman named Sarah, who had ice blue eyes and a reputation for leaving her opponents in their underwear. I don't just want a divorce, I told her, laying out the recordings I'd started making on my phone. I want the money back. All of it. The house down payment, the wedding expenses he embezzled from our joint account, and the Cayman fund he thinks I don't know about. Sarah looked at the evidence and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. May, in this state, commingling of assets is a bitch. But since he's been using your corporate earnings to fund a private account under a shell company while planning to defraud you, that's not just a divorce. That's a criminal conversation. Next, I called in a favor from a guy I'd worked with on the Riverside project, a digital forensic specialist named Marcus. I need you to ghost my home network, I told him, and I need you to bypass the encryption on a private cloud server. For 2 weeks, Marcus worked his magic. He found everything, the emails between Ken and Chloe, the vacation photos from trips Ken told me were for work, but the gold mine, it was the secret wedding folder on Ken's laptop. They had been planning to use my wedding, the one I was paying for, as a launching pad for their own life. They had a guest list for a private celebration in Italy, scheduled for 2 weeks after my wedding. They had even used my credit card to buy Chloe a reception dress that cost more than my bridesmaids' outfits. I didn't stop there. I contacted the vendors. I didn't cancel the wedding. That would be too easy. I changed the contracts. I spoke to the caterer, the $50,000 balance. I'll pay it, but I want the menu changed back to the shellfish-heavy selection, and I want the invoices sent to Mrs. Chen's personal assistant for final approval, but only after the ceremony starts. I spoke to the florist. I spoke to the DJ. I spoke to the videographer. The love story video Ken gave you? I said to the videographer, sliding an envelope across the table. Don't play it. Play this one instead. And whatever happens, do not stop the feed until the very end. If anyone tries to cut the power, I have a backup generator crew on standby. The most difficult part was the house. I had put down 90% of the deposit. I couldn't get it back without his signature. So, I played on his greed. Ken, honey, I said one night, sitting on the sofa with a glass of wine. I was thinking. For tax purposes, we should put the house under a living trust instead of our joint names. It'll protect us from creditors if the firm ever has a bad year. He looked up from his phone, his eyes narrowing. A trust? Who's the trustee? My father. I lied, but the beneficiaries are both of us. It's just a legal shield. He didn't even consult a lawyer. He was so convinced I was a boring spreadsheet girl that he signed the papers I put in front of him. He didn't realize he was signing a quitclaim deed that reverted his share of the equity to me in the event of proven marital fraud. By the night of the rehearsal dinner, I was ready. I sat at the long mahogany table surrounded by the Chens, and my best friend, Mrs. Chen, was making a toast about the joining of two great legacies. To May, she said, raising her glass, who finally learned how to dress for the occasion. To May, Chloe echoed, her eyes sparkling with hidden laughter. To the truth, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I took a sip of the champagne. It tasted like victory. The morning of the wedding was a blur of white silk and cold fury. I sat in the bridal suite, letting the makeup artists do their work. Chloe was there, buzzing around like a busy little bee helping me with my veil. You're shaking, May, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. It's okay to be nervous. It's a big step. I'm not nervous, Chloe, I said, looking at her reflection in the mirror. I'm focused. The walk down the aisle was the longest minute of my life. The music, a string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon, felt like a funeral march. I saw the faces of our guests, the business partners, the socialites, my parents looking so proud. And then there was Ken. He looked like the man I thought I loved. But as I reached the altar, I didn't see a husband. I saw a thief. The ceremony proceeded exactly as planned. The vows were exchanged, vows that were nothing but air. And then the priest asked the question. The video, please, I said. When the screens flickered to life, the first 10 seconds were what everyone expected. Photos of us, happy, smiling. Then the screen glitched. A sharp digital snap. The image shifted to a recording from 3 nights ago. It was the master bedroom. Ken and Chloe were sitting on the bed, counting a stack of cash, the cash I'd withdrawn for the wedding tips. I can't believe she's actually paying for the Italian villa. Chloe's voice rang out, crystal clear through the cathedral's state-of-the-art sound system. She's so pathetic. She really thinks you love her. I love her bank account, Ken's voice boomed. Once the papers are signed today, I'm the co-owner of the Riverside royalties. I'll give her 6 months, then I'll catch her being too busy for me and file for a no-fault divorce. We'll be living in Tuscany by spring, Chloe. The cathedral didn't just go quiet. It went dead. I turned to look at Ken. His face was the color of curdled milk. He looked at the tech booth, waving his arms frantically. Turn it off. Cut the feed. But the DJ and the videographer were under my orders. They didn't move. The video continued. It showed the spreadsheets Marcus had found, the Cayman accounts, the messages to Mrs. Chen where she told Kent, make sure the girl doesn't suspect the trust. I turned to the audience. I looked directly at Mrs. Chen, who was clutching her pearls so hard I thought they'd snap. The legacy you wanted so badly, Mrs. Chen, it's right there on the screen. I said into the mic, your son isn't a businessman. He's a parasite. And your favorite girl, Chloe? She's his accomplice. I looked back at Chloe. She was trying to hide behind the flower arrangement. And Chloe, I said, my voice echoing, don't worry about the reception dress you bought on my card. You can keep it. You're going to need something to wear to court when my lawyers sue you for every cent of the salary I paid you under false pretenses. I threw my bouquet at Ken's feet. It was made of lilies, the flowers of death. The wedding is over, I announced. But the bill? The bill is just getting started. The caterers have been instructed to send the $150,000 final invoice to the Chen estate. The house is already back in my name. And Ken, the Tesla is being towed as we speak. I hope you like walking. I turned around and walked back down the aisle. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could hear the roar of the crowd behind me. Not a roar of celebration, but the sound of 2 reputations being torn to shreds in real time. The walk out of that cathedral was the most exhilarating moment of my life. I didn't stop at the limousine. I had a black SUV waiting 2 blocks away, driven by a private security firm. As I climbed in, I took off the Vera Wang veil and left it on the sidewalk. It was just a piece of fabric. The woman who wore it was gone. But the real story didn't end at the church doors. The controlled demolition had only just begun. Within 48 hours, the video went viral. Someone in the pews, likely one of the socialites Mrs. Chen had spent decades trying to impress, had recorded the whole thing. The altar ambush was the lead story on every local news outlet and architectural blog. Ken's reputation in the industry was incinerated. You can't be a project manager when you're caught on camera admitting to embezzlement and fraud. The fallout for the Chens was catastrophic. Mrs. Chen tried to spin the story, claiming I was mentally unstable and had fabricated the footage. But my lawyer, Sarah, was ready. We didn't just sue for divorce. We filed a civil RICO suit. We alleged that Ken, Chloe, and the Chen family estate had conspired to defraud me of my earnings and corporate royalties. I froze the joint accounts. I revoked the trust Ken thought would save him, because he had signed those papers under the guise of protecting me, while actually intending to hide assets. The court ruled the signatures were obtained through fraudulent inducement. The house? Mine. The Cayman Fund? Most of it was clawed back by the forensic team before Ken could even remember his password. Then there was Chloe. Chloe thought she was playing the long game. She thought she'd end up with a rich husband and a villa in Italy. Instead, she ended up with a mountain of legal fees and 0 job prospects. No firm in the city would hire a wedding assistant who had been caught stealing from her best friend. I heard she had to move back into her parents' basement in a small town 3 states away. The last I heard, she was working at a mall kiosk, selling phone cases to teenagers who have no idea who she is. Ken tried to call me dozens of times. He sent emails, long-winded rants alternating between begging for forgiveness and threatening to sue me for emotional distress. I never replied. I just forwarded every single one to Sarah. One evening, about 6 months after the wedding, I was driving past a mid-range apartment complex near the industrial district. I saw a familiar white Tesla, the one I'd let him keep as part of a settlement that stripped him of everything else. It was dented, dirty, and had a for sale sign in the window. Ken was standing next to it, arguing with a tow truck driver. He looked older, grayer. The golden boy had lost his shine. I didn't even slow down. Mrs. Chen fared even worse. The scandal forced her husband to step down from the board of directors at the country club. Their social standing, the only thing she truly loved, was gone. They had to sell their estate to cover the legal settlements and the unpaid wedding bills I'd rerouted to them. As for me, the Riverside project was a massive success. I opened my own firm, May Architects. I don't hire best friends. I hire professionals. I live in the house I paid for, and the nursery, I turned it into a high-end home gym. Every time I hit the treadmill, I'm reminded of the strength it took to walk away from a hollow life. People ask me if I regret the money I spent on that wedding. $250,000 is a lot for a party that ended in a disaster, but I tell them the same thing. I didn't spend that money on a wedding. I spent it on an education. I learned that loyalty isn't bought and love isn't a spreadsheet. Most importantly, I learned that if you're going to build something beautiful, you have to make sure the foundation isn't built on lies. Because if it is, I'm the one who knows exactly where to place the charges to bring the whole thing down. And honestly, the view from the rubble is spectacular.